Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today I'm going to solve some of the mystery of ADHD. So please feel free to use the comment section to ask questions as the talk progresses. And at the end, I'll tell you about a presentation sponsored by Down to Earth. So just wanted to start out by saying that ADHD tends to be very overdiagnosed, I would say, in our modern society. And I've seen some children that are preschool age, 3 years old, where if they can't sit still, then sometimes they're told, your child has difficulty sitting still and your child needs to go on medication. And so there's unfortunate situations where I think in cases like those that it's really just overdiagnosed. I think there's a strong emphasis on our society on kids being able to sit still, and even at an age like 3 years old or 4 years old, where it's developmentally not appropriate yet. So that happens, but there's definitely very real cases of times when attention and focus is difficult, and where children have genuine difficulty in the classrooms being able to focus and pay attention. So I just wanted to go through and share with you some of the things that I've seen in my practice and how many children are actually being diagnosed with ADHD when there are actual medical conditions that could be underlying their symptoms, and that there are actually natural things that we can do to be able to address those medical conditions and treat them. So I'm going to go through about 8 different categories of different groups of medical conditions that I commonly see that can mimic ADHD. And just so that you know, just asking how many of you who are listening know that there are well over 50 medical conditions that can mimic the symptoms of ADHD. If you do, go ahead and then type into the chat. But most people are really surprised to hear that. And yet for some reason, when our children go into their pediatrician and say, my child's teacher is saying that my child has difficulty with attention focus in the classroom, here in America, none of those conditions are typically screened for. It's, okay, my child has difficulty with focus and attention, and then the knee-jerk reaction is just, okay, here's a medication. Here's a stimulant medication or another ADHD medication for that condition. And I'm not entirely against medications, but my concern is that are there underlying conditions that should be investigated and treated rather than just jumping to a pharmaceutical medication? So some of the overview that I'm going to give you, so I'm going to run through those 8 different categories, and I'll go through each one, and then I'll share a case with you, or a few cases of children that I've seen with ADHD. So number 1, diet. And number 2, nutrient deficiencies. Number 3, sleep problems. Number 4, adrenal problems. Number 5, thyroid problems. Number 6, low blood sugar. Number 7, heavy metals. And number 8, methylation problems. So I'm going to go through each of those. So number 1, diet. I have seen some children that come into my office where dyes and processed food, sugar are big contributing factors. And I've seen some children where they come into my office and all they do is they change their diet. Some children have a sensitivity to dyes, artificial dyes and flavors and food colorings. So there's a diet called the Feingold diet. It's Feingold. So Feingold diet is a diet that takes out the dyes, artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors, preservatives. And there's also some other types of foods that are included in that diet that are taken out. But for some children, I've seen some children where all they did was took out dyes, artificial flavors, sweeteners, all of these things, and then their child was fine. and had no problems with attention and focus. And there definitely is research finding that for some children, all of these food additives, the dyes and artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners, processed foods, can cause difficulty with focus and with attention and just with brain function in general. So that's one way that food could be contributing. Another thing is with sugar. I've seen some children that have constant sugary foods in their diet, candy and soda, and that when we take those foods out of their diet, then they calm down, they're able to sit and focus and pay attention, and they're, even if it doesn't completely resolve everything, that their attention focus is significantly, noticeably better. So that's another thing. Another way that diet could be a factor is if there's food allergies or sensitivities. I had a young man who had constant sneezing, and he just had congestion all the time. He had these headaches. And when we dug a little bit deeper into figuring out, well, why are you having difficulty with focus and attention? He would say, he'd say, it's like my brain is in a fog. It's like I can't think clearly. And I just, it's like I'm trying to think through a sludge in my head. And when we dug a little deeper, we found out, oh, he's got headaches, and it seemed to happen when he had allergy symptoms. He was sneezing and had itchy, watery nose. So we did some food allergy testing and found out that he actually had a whole bunch of foods that he was allergic to that he didn't even know. And when we took those foods out of his diet, then his headaches went away and he was able to focus and pay attention better. Some children or adults also have food sensitivities. Food sensitivities are a little bit different than food allergies. Allergies are the classic allergy type of symptoms that we think of. If someone's sneezing or they have itchy, red, watery eyes or nose, they might have hives, they might have upset stomach or diarrhea. So those are diagnosed by what's called an IgE food allergy test. And that can be done either by skin scratch testing or by blood testing. But food sensitivities can be a little bit different. That's a different type of antibody or protein that the immune system makes. And it's an antibody called IgG. And food sensitivities can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to track down because unlike food allergies, with food sensitivities, the symptoms may not show up until hours and sometimes even up to 72 hours after a person has consumed that food, because it just takes longer for the body to make that particular type of protein or antibody called IgG. And so that's another way that foods could be a problem, and you may not even realize it. Most of the time, if people have problems with focus, attention, or other types of symptoms, and they think it's a food, they will usually think of what did I just eat, or what did I just eat in the last day, but they don't necessarily think of what did I eat 72 hours ago. But with food sensitivities, that could be the case. So testing for food allergies or sensitivities is another way that that could be a contributing factor. So moving on to number 2, nutrient deficiencies. So it's not a surprise that nutrients are really important to help us focus and pay attention. And if you don't have enough of certain nutrients in your diet, then you may have difficulty being able to pay attention, focus. So the most common nutrient deficiencies that I see in my practice in ADHD are zinc, iron, and B vitamins. So zinc is a mineral that's very important for focus and attention. It's also important for our immune system too, to keep our immune system strong and healthy. And so that's another thing that we may see some difficulty with focus and attention if you don't have enough zinc in your diet. Another one is iron. So iron is important because it actually carries the oxygen in our red blood cells to all the different parts of our body. And if you don't have enough iron, then you may not be getting enough oxygen to your brain. And surprise, surprise, then you could have difficulty paying attention and being able to focus. So an iron deficiency is another one that's important to test for. Another one that I mentioned are B vitamins. And B vitamins are really important for your brain to function normally. So if you're not getting enough B vitamins, then you may not be able to focus and pay attention well. So that's another important thing to screen for. I really recommend that people get tested for these nutrient deficiencies, because with zinc or with iron particularly, it's possible to overdose on those, and that can cause problems. Or if you don't have a deficiency and you're taking too much, then that can also cause problems. For example, if you take too much zinc, zinc can cause nausea and vomiting. And so you definitely don't want to just take some random dose of zinc or run to the store and take a zinc supplement, because it might be too much and it could also cause nausea and vomiting. And children particularly are more sensitive than adults because they have a lower body weight. So that's another thing to be aware of, is that particularly with zinc and iron, you don't want to just run out and just grab a supplement from the store and start taking it, because it's possible to get too much of zinc, and it's possible to get too much iron. So testing for those are important, and that's why I will usually do testing first before I prescribe a dose. And for some of those, I'll try to see if we can get them through your diet rather than having to take another supplement. So in some cases, though, if you have really severe deficiencies, you may need to take a supplement, because if there's severe deficiencies, you might have to take huge amounts of certain foods in order to make up for that nutrient. So in certain cases, supplements might be needed. Number 3, sleep problems. There's actually really interesting research finding that there are a higher incidence of sleep problems like sleep apnea and other sleep disorders in ADHD. And surprise, surprise, if you're not getting enough sleep, or if you're not getting good quality sleep, then your brain is not going to be functioning well, and you could have difficulty with focus and attention. So with sleep problems, there can be things, for example, like sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is a condition where someone isn't getting enough oxygen, and then they may stop breathing. And then what happens is that in order to stimulate your body into breathing again, your body will kind of jolt itself, in a sense, to kind of wake up in order to stimulate your body to start breathing again. However, many people with sleep apnea don't ever consciously wake up. But the symptom that I really look for, the sign that I really look for, is if people say, you know, I'm going to sleep and I'm getting a full 8 hours of sleep. I'm not waking up during the middle of the night. But when I get up in the morning, I just feel exhausted, as if I didn't sleep at all, or I felt like maybe I got 1 hour of sleep instead of 8. And so if someone is getting sufficient sleep, or if they're sleeping the number of hours that they should be sleeping, but they wake up feeling just exhausted, then that's definitely one of the signs of sleep apnea. There's kind of a stereotype that sleep apnea is only occurring in overweight people, and that is certainly a risk factor, but I will tell you, I've seen a number of patients who were not overweight at all, kids who were completely normal weight, or adults, and their only symptom might be that they're having difficulty with focus and attention, and also that they wake up feeling tired, even when they've gotten enough hours of sleep. So that's another thing where I look for it. And just because someone's not overweight, that doesn't necessarily rule out sleep apnea. So that's certainly something to consider. There's other kinds of sleep disorders, more than I can get into over here. But another thing is that the key really is if your child is getting enough sleep, or they're getting, say, 7 or 8 or more hours of sleep. Most children should really be getting at least 8 hours of sleep. If they're younger, they should be getting usually 10 hours of sleep. And teenagers actually usually need at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep. There are very few teenagers who are getting that amount of sleep. But at a minimum, I say for teenagers, at least 8 hours. So if they are getting to sleep and they're not under the cover playing on their iPhone or something, but if they are actually asleep, but they're still waking up tired, then those are definitely things that should be checked in terms of sleep disorders. So number 4, adrenal problems. This is a really, really common one that I see in my practice. And why? Why would adrenal problems be related to focus and attention? So the adrenal gland is a little gland that sits on top of our kidneys. It's a little triangle-shaped gland, and it's responsible for making a lot of important chemicals in our body. Some of the chemicals that the adrenal gland has to make are norepinephrine and dopamine. And those are brain chemicals or neurotransmitters that are very well documented in research to find that often those are abnormal in ADHD, and they're often too low in ADHD where someone isn't making enough of it. And so as a result, if your adrenal glands are not making enough of those neurotransmitters or those brain chemicals to help you focus and pay attention, well, again, surprise, surprise, you could have difficulty with focus and attention. So one of the ways that I check for adrenal problems are both through blood testing and saliva testing. And the reason that I check for saliva testing is that one of the chemicals made by the adrenal glands is something called cortisol. And cortisol is responsible for your energy, for immune system. It's also important to help decrease inflammation in the body. And cortisol is supposed to start out high in the morning and go lower throughout the day. So it's supposed to start high over here and then go lower throughout the day. And I will typically test that with saliva testing so that we can do 4 saliva samples in a day and then be able to check what those cortisol levels are throughout the day. So usually I don't depend just on blood testing. I do the saliva testing because I don't know anyone who wants to get 4 blood draws in one day. And usually insurance won't cover that anyway. So that's one thing. So adrenal problems is, again, that 4th condition. Number 5, thyroid problems. So people can have a low functioning thyroid or hypothyroidism. And in hypothyroidism, then there can be fatigue or difficulty with having regular bowel movements. And so someone may tend towards constipation. They may have dry skin and dry hair, but they're also tired. And for some children, it may be mild enough where they don't feel exhausted. They may not be complaining of being tired, but they're tired enough where they have difficulty being able to focus and pay attention. So that's one of the things that I see, particularly in people who are in children who are not necessarily hyperactive, but where they have just difficulty with focus and attention, where they're primarily the inattentive type of ADHD. On the other end of thyroid, there's hyperthyroidism or high functioning thyroid, where the thyroid is too high functioning. And in hyperthyroidism, there can be a lot of hyperactivity, where someone has difficulty being able to sit still and focus. And so that's another possible cause. So thyroid problems, both too low and too high, those can both be issues with thyroid. And actually, with the adrenal gland too, I more commonly see issues where the adrenal gland is on the low functioning end, but I also have seen some kids with ADHD where the adrenal gland is too high functioning. It's making too much of some of those chemicals that I talked about. And so that can be a problem too if you have either too much or too little. So number 6, low blood sugar. So low blood sugar can be a problem where kids, if they don't eat for a certain number of hours, they hit this point where their blood sugar just crashes. And at that point, they may have they may be feeling tired, they may be feeling brain fog, they may be irritable, and they can also have difficulty focusing and paying attention. So that's one of the signs that I look for, is if a child or an adult says, you know, I mean, if I haven't eaten for several hours and start to get like irritable or grouchy, or I just feel like I get brain fog, or I can't think clearly, or I feel tired, then that's definitely one of the things to look for in terms of low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. And sugary foods can contribute to the problems with low blood sugar. So sugary foods, what can happen, so these are things like soda or candy or cake, pies, cookies, all those kinds of things. But even things with white flour, pastries, or even muffins or cupcakes or things like that that don't have a lot of fiber, have a lot of added sugar. Even sugary cereals. A lot of our kids' cereals have almost no nutritional value and tons of sugar, which can be very addicting. And so with sugary foods, what will happen is the blood sugar can spike, and then after the body has broken all that sugar down, the blood sugar crashes. And then when you're at the low point, that's when you can have low blood sugar, and you can manifest with the difficulty with focus and attention at that point. So it typically, in that kind of case, it'll come usually like a few hours after a meal where a person hasn't eaten. Some people have more problems with blood sugar regulation, where say if they haven't eaten for an hour or 2 hours, then their blood sugar will start to crash, and they'll start to have difficulty with focus and attention and irritability and those kind of things. So that's definitely something to look for. Another thing I want to add when talking about that is that blood sugar problems are not remedied by artificial sweeteners. There's actually some really interesting research finding that artificial sweeteners can actually cause more problems with your body's ability to regulate blood sugar. And regulate means that your blood sugar, it can go up and down, but your body should be able to even out the level of sugar that's in your blood. But artificial sweeteners, so that would include things like aspartame, saccharin, even Splenda or sucralose. So those are artificial chemical sweeteners, and there's research finding that those can actually cause problems with blood sugar regulation. So I do recommend avoiding those. There are some natural sweeteners, and there's debate about some of those, but stevia is one that's pretty natural. There's a green stevia powder that kind of has a green tea type of flavor, and that's the most natural form of stevia, because stevia is basically just a leaf that tastes sweet, and then it's dried and powdered, and that's what the green stevia powder is. It does have a certain aftertaste too. There's also white stevia powder. There's other natural sweeteners like honey or 100% pure maple syrup or xylitol, or also there's like monk fruit sugar or coconut sugar. Those can be, those tend to be better than white refined sugar, and for most people usually don't cause problems. So I usually will recommend trying to get more natural sweeteners and just trying to avoid the sugary foods in general. So that was number 6, or low blood sugar. Number 7, heavy metals. So heavy metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic are known to cause problems with brain function, with cognitive function. And often in conventional medicine, only heavy metal toxicity is really recognized. So if someone had a huge exposure to lead or mercury or to arsenic or other heavy metals, then the levels can be high in the blood. And then that can cause problems, of course, with brain function, but it will often cause more significant symptoms, like it could cause tremors or problems with speech or thinking clearly. Sometimes people will actually have temporary bouts of loss of cognitive function where they just completely are just spaced out, and it's like they're not even there. It's kind of like they're just checked out in their brain. They're not really there. So that can happen with severe heavy metal poisoning or toxicity. That being said, that's not the case in most of the patients that I see. Most of the patients that I see with ADHD that have problems with heavy metals, it's just slightly elevated, and it may not be high in the blood because the body will try to get heavy metals out of the blood as quickly as possible because it tends to be really damaging to the body. And so our body will try to get it out through our urine and through our poop. But sometimes people have problems with their liver being able to break down those heavy metals and get it out of the body. And in those cases, the heavy metals can build up even when there haven't been a huge exposure to really high levels of heavy metals. And in lower levels, heavy metals can definitely still affect brain function and focus and attention. And that can manifest with ADHD and with brain fog or difficulty thinking clearly or forgetting things a lot. So again, the focus and attention. And again, you may not see those levels high in blood testing, but it might be high on urine testing or on hair testing. So those are different ways to check for heavy metals that are not high in the blood, but where there's just a little bit in the body, but it's enough to cause problems with focus and attention. So that was number 7, heavy metals. And number 8, there are methylation problems. So methylation is a process that affects many different things in our body. Methylation is something that affects liver, and our liver is like our filter. It has to get all the junk out of our body. It has to filter our blood and then dump out the junk from our body. So you could think of our liver kind of like the drain catcher in your kitchen sink that has to catch all the food particles and all the junk and the hair and all the stuff that you don't want going down the drain. And some people have problems with their liver being able to filter out all of the junk. So that might be heavy metals. It could be other kinds of toxins from plastics or other chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and that the liver also has to filter out just waste products from our body's own cells. And if the liver has problems doing that, then heavy metals can build up and there can be other problems. So methylation is a process that affects liver detox, but methylation also directly affects neurotransmitters or brain chemicals, including norepinephrine and dopamine and other brain chemicals that help us to focus and pay attention. And so if someone has problems being able to focus and pay attention, it could be due to problems with methylation. And I test most of the patients with ADHD for methylation problems, and I would say a majority of the people that I test actually do come back with methylation problems. And methylation is something that is pretty new in research, and there's a lot of research coming out about it. But the good news is that methylation problems can be corrected by using specific types of vitamins and nutrients and things like B vitamins and zinc and there's many other nutrients that can cause problems with methylation, or that there are many other nutrients, if you don't have enough of them, it can cause problems with methylation. So that's just an overview of some of the 8 main medical conditions. As I said, there's actually many other medical conditions that can mimic ADHD, but those I would say are the most common ones that I see in my clinical practice. Another thing that I want to bring up is that some of our kids are tactile or kinesthetic learners, where they really need to learn by touching things and being hands-on in their learning. And our standard public educational school system, most of the time, is very heavily focused on visual and audio learners. So the teacher's up there talking, explaining something, and writing things on the board. So the talking will address the audio learners, and writing on the board will address the visual learners. But if you have a child who's a tactile or kinesthetic learner, they really need hands-on types of ways of learning. They need to build models, or they need to get up and move their body and maybe get blocks to learn addition, or things like that, where they're hands-on, they're touching things, and they're really being active with their bodies. And that if they're not engaging that aspect of their learning style, for those types of learners, they're not really going to learn very effectively, and they get bored in the classroom. And so some of those kids really need more hands-on or kinesthetic types of learning. And after this Facebook Live video, we can post a link to, there's a quiz that you can take to see if your child is a kinesthetic or tactile learner, or a visual or audio learner. You can figure out what the main learning style is for your child. And there's another link that has some practical tips in terms of helping your child and using practical techniques to help your child if they are a tactile or kinesthetic learner. It may also require modification from the teachers. Sometimes the teachers are not always willing to do that. There are some other private schools that will cater more to the hands-on style of learning, so that might be an option for some of our other kids. But just doing, if that's not an option for your child, trying to do as much as you can and trying to talk with your teacher, work with your teacher to try to incorporate more of those tactile or kinesthetic type of learning styles. And I think for some of our kids, that's really what it is, and that's why they get bored. I just wanted to let you know that I'll be wrapping up in a few minutes, and I'll be telling you more about a workshop that I'll be doing that's sponsored by Down to Earth. I just wanted to share really quickly a few cases of stories of patients that I've had where they've had an ADHD diagnosis, and we've been able to help them. So there's one child that I had that he had a diagnosis of ADHD. He also had some behavioral problems in the school, aggression. He would get easily frustrated. He had major delays in his reading, and he had difficulty focusing. And he was told by his teacher that he was about 2 grade levels behind. He needed a lot of repetition. And so with him, we did a number of tests. We made dietary changes. We also gave him particular types of supplements and nutrients to help to support his brain function and focus and address some of the nutrient deficiencies that he had. And I also taught his mom to do a specific type of massage to help with his sense of feeling his sense of space, because he had some issues with what are called sensory processing disorders. And so the massage really helped with the sensory part of things. So they noticed improvement. He didn't need to be redirected as often. They also found that he wasn't getting as distracted. He was able to focus and pay attention better. And he started becoming more motivated to do well in school. And he also before had a lot of impulsivity. He would kind of blurt things out. And he was really easily distractible without someone to redirect him. But after a number of months of working with him, we found that he wasn't as impulsive. He was able to just raise his hand if he wanted to say something, and didn't have to be constantly redirected. He was able to do more work on his own. And eventually he was actually nominated for a gifted and talented program at his school. And so he actually went from being 2 grade levels behind to being nominated for a gifted and talented program, which is really exciting. Another case that I had was another boy who had difficulty with attention and focus. And he had also behavior issues in school. And he was going through counseling, and he was it was just very difficult to get him to focus and pay attention to do his homework. Mom and dad had to sit with him and constantly redirect him and help him to do his work. It was kind of hand over hand because he just couldn't sit down and focus and do his work. And we found that he had a number of nutrient deficiencies. He had methylation problems. He also had some food allergies and sensitivities. And he came to me, he was not on pharmaceutical ADHD medication, and the goal was his parents didn't want to start him on pharmaceutical ADHD medication. And I've been working with them for a number of years, and I'm happy to say he never had to start on ADHD medication. He's made a lot of progress over time. That did take time for sure to address the methylation issues and the nutrient deficiencies and work on changing his diet and all these other things. But over time, we really were able to help him improve, and now he's doing really well in school. He's not getting A's all the time, but he's not failing anymore. He's getting B's, and he's doing pretty well in school, not having the behavioral issues anymore, and he's able to focus and pay attention and do his work. He still needs some support, but he's improved really dramatically from where he was before. And his mom reported that it was just so rewarding to see the improvements in her child. And so that's something that, she really felt like all the hard work in changing his diet and taking different supplements and all these things really paid off. And I also have a number of children that come to me that are on pharmaceutical ADHD medications, and the parents would like to be able to wean them down or get them down to a lower dose, or eventually be able to wean them off. And there's a number of children that I've worked with where we've been able to eventually wean down on the medication, and in some cases are able to get them off of the medication completely. So again, I'm not opposed to pharmaceutical medication, but I just don't think that it should be a replacement for figuring out what are the underlying causes. Are there underlying medical issues that need to be addressed, and that we need to be able to address those underlying conditions? And when we do, then often we see a lot of improvements. So I just want to thank you for joining us today. And I wanted to share with you about a workshop that I'll be doing. This is going to be on a different topic, but it's going to be a workshop that's sponsored by Down to Earth. It'll be on June 13th at 6 p.m. That's a Wednesday night. And I'll be giving a workshop sponsored by Down to Earth entitled Natural Remedies for PMS, Menstrual Cramps, and Migraines. So this is going to be on hormonal types of issues in women, so PMS, menstrual cramps, and hormonal migraines. The cost is just $15, and I will be giving actionable information, information that you can take action on that's worth probably about at least 10 times that, if not more. And if you or someone that you know has problems with PMS, menstrual cramps, or migraines, then this is the workshop for you. So again, it's Wednesday, June 13th from 6 to 7 p.m. at Down to Earth, King Street location. And you can go to our Facebook page to see the flyer and all the information about the workshop. So thank you for being here. I trust that you learned something new and helpful about ADHD. And if you have a child with ADHD or who is exhibiting some of those types of symptoms, then please call our office. I do offer a complimentary 15-minute phone consultation to see if I can help. So we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next Facebook Live, and wish you aloha. Thanks.